Restrainability is the ability to hold yourself back in a positive way. And in this short conversation, we're going to explore restrainability from the point of view of conversation, of how we converse and interact with other people. And that can be in our family life, with our friends socially, or at work as well. With restrainability, you begin with silence rather than with the wish to fill the silence as quickly as possible, either by you instigating a conversation or by you quickly responding to a conversation. And as I sit here in this beautiful garden with the noises of the city around me, and actually there have been some military aircraft going over London because it's Victory in Europe Day, VE Day, I am aware of the silence of this garden is a place where I don't need to speak to anybody when I'm on my own. And silence comes naturally, of course, to you when you're on your own, though when you're silent for a long time you might find that you're actually speaking but just in your head, and you might even speak aloud. But in a conversation with someone else, when we restrain and hold back as a good thing, as a positive thing, we are in a place of waiting. We're in a place of being ready to notice, for example, what someone else is saying to us. We are creating space for somebody else to speak because we're not speaking first. And that might not come easily to you unless you practice it a bit. But what it does is it does open the possibility for the silence to continue, which might feel a bit weird, but it doesn't involve wasting your words. Now, you might instigate a conversation sometimes, but the idea of restrainability is that you have that ability to hold back when you want to. And particularly if, like me, you don't have trouble filling the silence with words, it can be a really good practice. Now, when we're in conversation with, say, just one other person, that will look and take a particular form. So it can be that someone is speaking to us, and instead of already forming what we're about to say halfway through what they're saying, therefore not really listening to what they say to the end, we listen. We listen until they finish speaking. And in an ideal world, you would then just be silent, because you would take in what they're saying, not just while they're saying it, but you would digest it. You would take it in, you would look at it, you would think about it, and what you say would be an absolute response to what they've said to you. And that doesn't come when we half form our thoughts halfway through what they're saying, because we're not really listening. We might do that because we think we're being more efficient and we're not wasting time because we think we've got the gist of what they're saying. But often it just leads to further clarification and further speaking, using up their energy and using up ours, and filling the silence with too many words that are not needed. And when we are overlapping and trying to clarify, and then the person follows up because they don't feel completely heard, we have an inefficient conversation. That can be quite buzzy, and that's not to say in certain social situations it's not good to speed up and have a bit of fun overflowing. But in terms of practicing restrainability, particularly where we want a high quality conversation to happen, and that might be the case, for example, at work, or when one of our family members is really wanting us to hear what they say, or are really interested in what we have to say. Restrainability is our ability to hold back and fill up the conversation from empty, a bit like filling a milk jug, from empty up until the level we need, not wasting anything, rather than, as a lot of people do, they overfill and then have to either pour away and waste, or if they can, pour it back into the bottle. You certainly don't see that happening much in cafes, for example, and there's a lot of waste as a result of it. So one of the skills of restrainability is just to get into the habit of sometimes reading a situation where you begin with silence, with that jug as empty. And then when a question is asked or something is said to you, you might remain silent, but you certainly use time to ensure that your reply, having held back and made space for the other person, then rises up to be just what you need to say, not too much, not too little. And one thing you will find is if you do take in what someone is saying or what's going on around you, and you do genuinely think about it, what you say tends to be just what you need to say anyway, because you've already probably edited what you're going to say. in a good way, in the same way that if you ever get a text or you're on a messaging conversation, instead of typing halfway through while they're typing, if you just pause and then write your reply and even read that out loudly or in your head, you will nearly always edit it down or even decide not to send it. Because quite often when we're going on automatic, we're just wasting lots and lots of words, and when we look back, it is not exactly what we would have said anyway. Now, in the background here, you can probably hear the noises of aeroplanes going by. I think someone's actually calling their cat as well. The world is filled with noise, and so we can get into the habit of thinking that noise is the default. But with restrainability, silence is the default. If we're building what we need to make a shelter in nature, which many people have done for thousands of years, we take what we need. We don't take more than we need. We can always go and get more later. So we don't form judgments too fast. We don't start speaking not knowing where that is going to take us. We don't already form our sentences halfway through somebody else speaking. We don't need to be going to sort of buy ourselves time as we're quickly in our head creating the noise that will create some sort of set of materials out of which we're going to speak. But we trust slowing down. We trust the silence. We trust particularly in the silence that then when we're listening to somebody, we notice what they're saying, and then that becomes the raw material of just what we need to reply. Now that can feel weird, slowing down can feel weird. People might even ask you, are you okay? And you can simply politely answer, I'm just thinking about what you said. And people get used to it. But actually, in business meetings, for example, you can find the meetings are more productive, that actually they cover more ground on far less words. So restrainability isn't a negative thing where you keep going, I have to cut down what I say. You try to create the natural default to the place at which you just say what you need. And silence, which uses up far less energy and even can help you recover and grow some energy, is actually the more productive and efficient thing to do. So do you have the ability to hold back? Can you start to experience holding back actually as a place of energy, as a place of possibility, as a very positive place to be? I'd invite you to try it, because actually if in the world we want to start to deal with some of our sustainability problems, and restrainability is all about the ability of individuals, groups, businesses, societies to just use what they want and just take what they need, and always then have the space to put back later as well, to replenish. That can happen in conversation too. And that can involve having had a much better quality of conversation and maybe even finish that conversation more quickly. That meeting has ended much more productively. We've then got a little bit of time left over to put back, to learn, to look back on the conversation, to maybe notice. Sometimes it can be good to just look back over a conversation in reverse order and things jump out where you think, I need to clarify that later. I need to follow up on that. And the things that come out of that conversation are like the blooming of the conversation, like the flowers that bloom. And then the restrained conversation can lead to action that follows, because it's been born of what really needed to be talked about rather than all the mess that was in our head. So you find when you take just what you need in nature, there isn't much mess to clear up. And anything that's left over can be put back. We can take the little bit of waste and put it back into the soil, for example. Taking far too much wood means we've got it left over and it just lies there and rots. Taking just what we need creates the possibility to take more than we need if that's the case. But we develop a skill over time, which is when we're restrained, we get much more efficient. It feels more positive and motivating, and there's a sense of satisfaction that arises from it that's far greater than if we achieved a task but what was left over was lots and lots of waste.